I'm Connie Barden, Chief Clinical Officer of the American Association of Critical Care Nurses, and I'm thrilled today to get the chance to have a conversation with Dr. Marianne Chulay on the topic of vaccines and nurses. Many of you may remember Marianne as a past president of AACN several years back, or if you ever worked at the NIH, you may have known her or her legacy from her years there as a clinical nurse specialist in critical care. But most recently, and for many years, 15 or 20 years at least, all of us know Dr. Marianne Chulay as a preeminent leader in nursing research and mentor literally to thousands of nurses across this country and their units in their hospitals in bringing an understanding and a doing of research right to the bedside, where any nurse, regardless of role, can participate in research, understand it, and really get it and its importance to patient care. So who better to talk to us today about the very important topic to us right now, which is vaccines, clinical trials, and nurses. So Marianne, thank you so much for carving out time to talk with us. You know, you told me not long ago that this summer you participated in one of the clinical trials. The thoughts and considerations that go through your mind when you're making that decision, there are things about, oh, we're going first. I've heard a lot of people using the term guinea pig lately and all of that. Did any of that go through your mind? What was your thinking?
Well, I can't say that it did. I mean, I can imagine that it would for a lot of people, but because of my husband and I both have very strong science backgrounds, and we've been following the literature on at least the Pfizer Moderna vaccines, this new messenger RNA vaccine. So we were intellectually understanding the science behind the technology. I'm sure for anyone else it would be an incredibly big conversation item, but for us it had already occurred over probably 2 months. So it felt right when we were given the opportunity. We feel at the time we knew about some of the phase 2 results and from the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine. So there were no real stumbling blocks or roadblocks in terms of side effects. They were very typical side effects that you'd expect with any vaccine. So, we felt comfortable. But again, I can certainly understand why some people might have concerns, which is why I recommend you've got to understand the science of whatever the vaccine is you're being offered, because that'll help you realize what the risks and the benefits might be to you.
One of the specific concerns that I hear a lot of people talk about is the speed at which these vaccines are being brought to market. Why do you think the manufacturers have been able to do this when normally lead-in time for vaccine is years, multiple years, and this has been under a year? What do you know about that?
Yeah, I think one of the sad things about this whole, the description of this warp speed thing is that it's given people the idea that the science of the conducting of the trials has been speeded up. And that's not exactly what's speeded up. What's really been speeded up is the processing or the manufacture of the vaccine, the behind the scenes stuff. But the actual clinical trials themselves have not been rushed through. They're going through the same time span that would normally happen with any vaccine or drug therapeutic. But what's different is a normal process, you would test the vaccine at phase 1, you would pause, you would do all sorts of manufacturing changes and scale up for the next. And so there'd be these interims in between phase 1, 2, and 3 where there'd be big lag times while the company took the next step in terms of development of the product. And that didn't go on with actually, there's 6 vaccines that are in the process of being developed that the government provided the money to the company early days to give them enough money to do all of the production of the vaccine, assuming it would be good and not knowing, because they were still in phase 1 trials at the time the money was allocated to those groups. So what's got speeded up is companies didn't have to stop after phase 1 and if you will, produce enough vaccine for the next step of the trial.
I think nurses really want to know how to make good decisions, and they would be interested. Did you have some side effects from either injection 1 or injection 2? What was that like? Did you feel okay, or?
we anticipated that if we got the vaccine with the first injection, we should have some local inflammation. That would be a pretty typical response to a vaccine. And so within, I would say, an hour after getting the vaccine, my husband reports to me, we're on our way driving home. He says, "Oh, my arm hurts." And I'm like, "Mine doesn't hurt." So I'm like thinking, "Oh man, I got the placebo, darn." In the evening, I developed it. I'm like, "Oh, guess what? I got pain in my arm." It was very minor pain with the first injection. Absolutely not even as, probably similar to what you get with a flu shot, where you get a little heat, a little bit of pain. And then after the second injection, a very similar scenario. I had a little bit of discomfort at the injection site, so did my husband. And then for me, about 12 hours after receiving the vaccine, I developed a little bit of a low-grade fever. I was kind of achy all over, sort of like you feel with the flu. Had what I call a generalized malaise. I didn't want to do anything. I mean, I didn't have any energy, but I wasn't really sick, but just, I just felt punky. And then it was as though somebody flipped a switch 12 hours later. I went from that to feeling perfectly fine. So there was a little bit, for me, there was a little bit of, what they call mild post-vaccine symptoms.
That's very helpful. And as we wrap up, I heard as recently as this morning about a survey that showed that about a third of nurses are saying, "Yep, can't wait, going to get that vaccine." About a third are on the fence, not sure. And about a third are saying, "Heck no, I'm not interested." So what advice, given your experience and it's in your DNA that you are a nurse scientist and you don't make emotional decisions, you make scientific and intellectual decisions. But given this whole experience, what advice do you have for nurses as they consider the decision-making coming up for them in the future around the vaccine?
Well, I think that no matter whether they think they've already made up their mind or not, I think as they're presented with the opportunity to take the vaccine, I think everybody needs to step back and reassess. So I think the first step for anyone is to really understand the science and the evidence that we have with the vaccine, okay? And in order to do that, I think it's really important right now to go to trusted sources for information about the vaccine and what we know about it in terms of side effects and efficacy. I'm very concerned right now. There's a lot of mis or disinformation going around, particularly in social media, that's incredibly wrong based on the science and the evidence we have. So I think as people make their decision, they need to be very cautious about getting proper information through places like the FDA, the CDC, AACN. You've got links to all sorts of things, the trusted sources for information that are not serving the wrong agenda. So that's number one, is to really know what the science, what the evidence shows us about the vaccines. I think the other thing you've got to do is weigh the risks and the benefit for you personally. All of us are different. All of us have different family situations. We all have different health situations. I think you have to look at it from a very personal standpoint and say, if I get this vaccine, what might be the risk? If I don't get the vaccine, what might be the risk? Because if less than 70% of us get the vaccine, we're going to be very unlikely to push down this virus and get control of it. We have to, people talk about it as herd immunity, but with 70% of the people having either been infected before with the virus or having had the vaccine, there's a really good chance we can push this thing down and really kind of squelch it. But without that, we're going to be living with this for a long time. So that's kind of the way I would encourage people to think.
That's very helpful. Very, very much a scientific and a human approach. So thank you for that. And those are my questions. Are there any other comments or questions that you have to wrap up today?
Well, let me turn the tables on you, Connie. What about you? What have you been thinking about whether or not you're going to get vaccinated? And if not, what are your concerns or issues?
Oh, I'm in. I want to know how I can get one, tomorrow, if I can get my hands on it. And I just kind of have been that way. And I am one of those people that comes from absolutely understanding the data. And I know FDA is not done with their analysis. Of course, I'll wait on that. And I trust that completely. But I've already done the other part, my risks and benefits personally, and I am one of those that does feel like I have a part to play in the profession and in society. So it's bolstered by talking to people who I respect, like you and your husband, and knowing that folks like you have stepped up. And I'm right behind you. As soon as I can get my arm near a vaccine center, I'll be there as well, just like you.
Good.
Yeah. Marianne, I can't thank you enough. It's an honor always to have you come and talk to us and share your knowledge and wisdom. And I know you had to carve it out of a busy schedule, so thank you again for sharing your time and expertise with us.
You're welcome, and I was glad to do it.